Hello, and welcome to the Success Showcase. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin with the Modern Observer Group. And with me, as always, is Chip Janiszewski from the Happiness and Success GPS. How you doing today, Chip?
I'm doing great, Eric. Took a walk without a coat on at the end of February. Can't do that too often.
No, it's been strange weather this year. Very warm, very cold, very all over the mark. And of course,
Yep.
we are recording this on President's Day. So I'd like all of our listeners to take a moment and actually think about what a president does and the effect it has on them. Because if you take a look at a photograph of any president, doesn't matter who, at the beginning of their term, and take a look at a picture of them at the end of their term, they look like they've aged 20 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I would highly recommend doing that too, but it's not a job without stress for sure. And obviously, you're just an open target in so many different ways from so many different people. So, um,
Absolutely. And of course, in the course of everything they do, they create an image. And sometimes they create an image on purpose, and sometimes an image is foisted upon them by the media or other people. And that image becomes their brand. And that's actually what we're going to be talking about today is creating a brand, both a personal brand and a business brand. Now, last week we talked about finding your why. And the fact of the matter is, your why is what pushes you. But if you keep that why to yourself, nobody knows what it is. It doesn't fulfill its purpose. And that's part of what your brand does. It's telling people who you are, who your business is. And like what happens with presidents, if you don't work on putting your brand together, others will assign the brand to you.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm doing a little bit of research on this as I always do. One of the statements that sticks out, which is absolutely true, a true personal brand revolves around what other people say about you. So what you need to do is you need to really talk about what revolves around you and say that about yourself to kind of set people in the right direction and the people around you. But it's all about public opinion. And obviously, it's no greater than it's ever been today. And it's going to be even more and more so tomorrow. So it's really, really important to be focused on your why and stay true. Don't stray from what you're talking about and so on and so forth. And obviously, you're going to have, depending on what your job is, obviously, the president of the United States is huge. But if you're running a company or running your own business and so on and so forth, the more that you can do is just to be your genuine self and to just be straightforward without straying from what your why is, the better off you're going to be.
Exactly. And when you're putting forth your brand, I mean, the first step, of course, is figuring out what it is. And that should be tied to your why, which is what we talked about previously. So once you've identified what your why is, you want to take that and make that your personal brand. And here's the thing, it's very difficult to change a brand once you've established it. And that's not just true for people, it's true for companies as well. I usually, when I talk about branding in a workshop, I use two different examples, one of which is Walmart. And a number of years ago, Walmart decided they didn't want to be the low cost leader anymore. They wanted to be a little more upscale, something similar to what Target was doing to better compete with them. So they redid their logo and they redesigned their stores and raised some of their prices. Except to their audience, they were the low cost leader. And when the prices started going up, people went, well, if you're not the low cost leader anymore, what are you offering me? Why should I shop here? And their sales dropped. So they realized they had been branded as the low cost leader, and that was the brand they needed to follow through with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, business brand, again, it's what comes to mind when existing potential customers think of you. It answers the question, what do you want to be known for? And Walmart, for so long, was known as the discount place, and to change itself around, it wasn't going to work because that's what they knew. And the bottom line is, obviously, being a big company, they should have had people on board and so on and so forth to research and to really just set them straight that maybe this is not the way to go, that we have a really good niche that we're at. It's not like they were struggling financially in profit and loss or anything like that. You know, a lot of people love Walmart, a lot of people love Target, and they're different types.
Absolutely. And again, same sort of situation. Company that wanted to decided they wanted to change to better compete with a competitor. Now, of course, there's a lot of people that don't remember this, but back in the early 1980s, Coca-Cola decided they wanted to change their brand, and they changed the secret formula for Coca-Cola and introduced the new Coke. And there's a lot of speculation to this day that New Coke was so bad on purpose so that when they brought back the original formula, it would pick up steam. Um, I've actually done some research on this recently, and there's been shows on this. And unfortunately, this was not the case. This was just a bad mistake that Coke made. Nobody wanted new Coke. Coca-Cola was sacred to them. It was a part of their childhood. And when they decided they wanted to make their formula more like Pepsi in order to compete better, but as it turned out, that wasn't what their audience wanted. So they brought back, first they called it Coca-Cola Classic and then phased out New Coke altogether. And that ended up being one of the best things they ever did because Pepsi never caught up with them after that. But their brand was their flavor. It wasn't just a matter of what they were saying or what they looked like, it was the flavor.
Yeah. And one of the advantages that they do have is they actually were a product that the name of that product was associated with their name. Everybody talked about Coke. Not as many people talk about Pepsi or RC Cola
Yep.
or anything like that. So they always had Coke going for them. Perhaps if Pepsi had done that, it might not. Well,
So, I mean, these are two cases of businesses trying to change what they were to an audience, but their established brand actually defined them. It kept them where they were. And your personal brand can do the same thing for you on an individual basis. Your brand is what people say, not just say about you, but feel about you. What's the impression that they get? And one of the biggest elements in creating a personal brand, and it's actually so simple that it's not even mentioned in Marketing 101. It's when you do something, when you say you're going to do something, actually follow through and do it. Otherwise, you're creating the brand that you're unreliable. And that's not a brand anybody wants. So your actions have to match what you're saying in order to create a positive brand.
yeah, absolutely. And obviously, there's a lot of things that go together as far as putting together a good business brand. And you coach people through this. I don't, but it's things like um, having the company's name that might be good for their brand, logo, slogan, other symbols, websites. There's a whole lot of things that go into that that all have to be very, very, very consistent to promote the same message. So, I mean, why don't you talk about the different components of your brand?
Well, that's actually you hit on a key phrase right there is consistency. And one of the worst things you can do to build a brand is be inconsistent. Your logo should be, and for businesses, your logo should be the same logo on your website as it is on your business card, on your letterhead, if you're using letterhead still. Your colors should be consistent. I had one client years ago that said, "Well, I want to use the colors blue and gray." Okay, blue and gray are not specific enough for branding purposes. First of all, gray is not actually a color. Gray is a percentage of black. So you have to know what percentage of black you want to use. When you're picking a color, blue, there are literally hundreds of blues. Which blue do you want? So you have to think about that and be consistent all the time. If you're a larger company and you've got employees and you're going to have company uniforms like fast food workers do, you want the colors of your uniform to match the colors on your website, the colors on your business cards, the colors in your logo. It all needs to be consistent. From a personal aspect, that consistency works also. I had actually created my brand, my personal brand originally completely accidentally because when I started my business, one of my first clients was a Fortune 500 company. And when I needed to be on site there, I needed to be dressed appropriately for a Fortune 500 company. So I was always in a suit. And when I would go to networking meetings, I was in a suit. And when I would meet with a small client, I was in a suit. Well, those suits became so identified with me that one day I showed up to a networking meeting in a polo shirt and cargo pants, and people actually did not recognize me when they saw me. They had to do a double take and think about who it was that I was there. So that consistency creates your brand, and it's much better to do it on purpose than to just have it happen to you. Now, in my case, being identified, with a formal suit and business-like attire, that's not a bad thing. But what if I had been wearing something just completely inappropriate that I hadn't thought about? I'd be stuck. And it happens all the time. And those brands stick. There have been a number of musicians who have said, "Yeah, I wore this outfit when we went on tour the first time. If I knew I'd still be touring 30 years later, I would have picked something else."
Hmm. Yeah, and obviously, there's a whole lot of different types of professions out there. I mean, with you being a very high-end consultant and everything, obviously wearing a suit is a big part of what you're doing. And if you did walk around, just wearing blue jeans and a polo shirt, uh, things aren't going to happen that way. So, I mean, I forget what the company was that says image is everything. What was that? Nike? I can't remember. But
Nike's Just Do It. I don't remember who Images Everything is.
for something, some other company used that slogan. I forget what it is, but there's are a whole lot of different things out there that are consistent there. So you're right. It is very, very important to do that, and especially if you are out there as the face of something out in public, doing presentations and so on and so forth, and people know you by look.
Yeah, absolutely. You need to be identifiable in a positive way. And this is actually something that a lot of people don't think about when they work for someone else. Creating a personal brand is just important if you're an employee as if you're an employer. Because nowadays, you don't go to work when you leave college and stay at a company for 30 years and then retire. At some point, you're going to change companies. You're going to change careers. You may even have a second or third career after you retire. And your personal brand is what's going to get you that next job. It's who you're presenting to an employer.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, last week we talked about, as far as finding your whys, we talked about the whats. The whats are basically what your branding is, as far as what you're doing and so on and so forth. But the most important thing is the brand itself, which is you. And it's got to be an emotional connection with whoever you're dealing with, because that, whether you're working for a big company or working for yourself, it all comes down to you.
all right. And again, the brand is who you present to the world. Now, this isn't, I mean, we always say you need to be authentic, but it doesn't have to be everything you are. It has to be authentic, but it doesn't mean, full disclosure. And the best example for this is introverts. It's perfectly fine to be an introvert. But when you go out, your brand still needs to be that you're out there, that you're doing for people, that when you say you're going to do something, you're going to do it. People don't need to know that you're an introvert if you can put on a face and and interact with folks. If you're doing a presentation for the first time, yes, you need to be authentic. Nobody needs to know that you're terrified. The fact of the matter is, most people are terrified when they're presenting for the first time. So your brand needs to project confidence, even if you're not feeling confident. We always talk about being authentic, and this sounds like, well, you're putting on a happy face, and you are. But the fact of the matter is, you don't have to tell people everything about yourself to create a positive brand. You do need to put that positive face forward and focus on what you want people to say. I mean, if you're a quiet person, that's fine. If you don't mind people saying, oh, they're very quiet. But you don't want people saying, oh, yeah, don't put that person in front of a crowd. They're not going to do well. They're too shy. You want people to assume you can do anything you're saying you can do. And that image is your personal brand. So whether you're a business owner and you're doing this to project yourself as an entrepreneur, or you're an employee and you're creating this brand to get ahead in your company, to get ahead in your career, it's all the same factors.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the word focus, and that's the most important thing. If you have a key message, the most important thing you can do is just focus on that. That's what your brand is the key message. You have to be genuine and consistent with that. And if you are, it doesn't matter what your approach is. In fact, if you want to walk up and tell people that you're terrified or something like that a little bit and make that part of your act, that's great. Crosby, Stills, and Nash went to Woodstock, and the first thing they did when they got up on stage to play their first song, they said, "Man, this is the first time I've ever played in front of people." And there were lots of people there. They said, "Man, we're scared blankless."
Yeah.
And then they blew the crowd away, and that was the start of Crosby, Stills, and Nash. And they had a ball. It was just amazing, and they were just genuine up there. A lot of people are. It's something that you can develop, and if you don't have a little bit of nervous energy, no matter how often you talk in front of people, then something's a little bit wrong there too.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with being scared as long as you can use that fear. And actually, what Crosby, Stills, and Nash did was a very common branding technique. When they got up there and they told people they were scared blankless, what they were doing was setting an expectation that they knew they were going to be able to exceed. So they were setting expectations and then exceeding them, which is a great branding practice. Because when you set people up that, okay, this is what you can expect, this is what we are promising, and then you exceed that and you do more and you do better, that also becomes part of your brand and it draws people to you.
Yeah, and obviously they had all had experience with other bands too, which helped out. Very, very popular bands, Buffalo Springfield, the
Yep.
Birds, and Crosby. Yeah, basically the Hollies was the other one, and so they knew what they were doing. But getting up there and playing together for the first time, and their voices, I mean, they're still one of my favorite all time bands. They're just absolutely amazing and had long careers, and they're still going. Unfortunately, we lost David Crosby recently, but it just goes to show if you just go up there and you're genuine, you have the focus, and you have the brand and the goods that you deliver, everything is going to work out, and we're all different, and that's part of the fun of it.
Absolutely. Something else that's important about branding is that branding, especially for businesses, is about engaging the senses. So, we talked about consistency in terms of colors, but there are a lot of businesses that go way beyond that. And, we mentioned Coca Cola, the consistency in the flavor. No matter where, what you got, what can you got, it was always Coca Cola. It always tasted the same. McDonald's built their brand on the idea that no matter where you went into a McDonald's, you were going to get the same experience time and time again. And in terms of businesses that have, physical locations like McDonald's, you're talking about engaging sight. The lighting's always the same, the colors are always the same. You're talking about engaging smell. It's the smell of the burgers, the smell of the Big Mac. And it's not just for restaurants. Walk into any Old Navy anywhere in the country, and it's this exact same smell. I don't know how they create the smell, but every Old Navy has it. It's part of their brand. And again, they've got the same look in every Old Navy, the same lighting. Generally, you have music when you walk into a store. You may not even notice it when you walk in, but it's part of their brand. So you're talking about engaging the senses to create an experience, and that experience becomes your brand. And once you have that brand, it is very important that you live up to it. Right now, Disney is having a lot of problems because for decades, their brand was family friendly. And recently, they've put out a couple of movies that people thought were not as appropriate for young children as their traditional fare was. Those movies did not do well at the box office because of that. And they're having problems that, stock prices down, revenues are down because people expect family friendly from Disney. And when they're not getting it, they go elsewhere. So once you've created your brand, it's very important that you live up to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Walt Disney himself is a brand story in himself because he failed a lot of times before he came up with Mickey Mouse, and everybody thought he was nuts. And all of a sudden, that little mouse and everything, look what came out of that. I mean, I grew up watching the Wonderful World of Disney. I was looking for that every single Sunday as I was growing up. He built a show around that. He built an amusement park, but it was all for kids and for families, and it's still going well there too. So again, just like Walmart, a little bit straying away from the basics gets you in trouble. So it's got to be a fun family time, no matter what you're doing. That's their brand. That's their main focus. To me, it's fun for the family, whether it's movies or amusement parks or whatever they're doing.
Exactly. And, when you're creating a brand, that brand isn't necessarily going to be tied to one thing. as Chip just said with Disney. That family friendly brand started with movies, but it also went into television. It went into books. It went into amusement parks. They were able to take that family friendly brand and spin it off into a lot of different things. Now, this doesn't always work if your brand is very tightly associated with one object. Kentucky Fried Chicken or KFC back in the 70s launched two other businesses. One was Kentucky Ham and Roast Beef, and the other was a hotel chain called the Colonel's Inn. Well, Colonel Sanders was known for chicken, and both of these other ventures that the company decided to go off into failed miserably because they weren't core to the brand of Colonel Sanders.
Yeah, they
So
could. Yeah, could be more different.
yeah, so when you're creating that brand, you have to understand your brand better than anybody else and understand where you can go with it and where you can't. And if there's something that you want to do that's not part of that brand, you actually need to create a second brand. And that's been done over and over again. Take a look at General Motors. How many different brands of cars do they have? Why? Because they have Cadillac that was luxury cars, and they had Chevrolet for family friendly cars, and each line was targeted to a specific audience. So there's nothing wrong with having multiple brands for multiple audiences, but it has to be done deliberately if you're going to try something like that. So now, Chip, we've talked about how to deliberately create a brand, but you sort of stepped into your brand.
Yeah, I did, and that's why I hope you folks are listening to this story because it's some stepping stones as far as what you're doing. For me, it's took me a long time to really figure out my why. My background was working in the family business, learned a lot of business, ran my dad's company, uh, started networking when I was in my 40s, and started teaching and so on and so forth, and doing consulting for other businesses. And so strategic planning is all about figuring out what you want to do and how you're going to do it. And I found out that in so many ways people didn't do that. And fortunately for me, I've always done a lot of personal development work. So I was in my early 60s when I stood up at a meeting and I just said, "Good morning, I'm Chip Janiszewski. I'm the Happiness and Success GPS. You can't be successful unless you're happy." There's a lot of miserable people out there because their main focus is on the wrong thing. And so it took me a long time to realize that what I'm meant to do is to teach people that the present moment is a choice. You have a choice to be positive, realizing life is always going to have ups and downs. But most of what is emphasized out there is the negative side of things. So pumping a little positivity into that and planning accordingly, that's what I teach people to do, and then to apply it in different ways. And that's that's how I came up with the Happiness and Success GPS. And that's what it is. It's basically present moment awareness that you can make any moment positive. And if you have that going for you, and you can do that over 50% of the time, things are going to be good for you. So, but yeah, I kind of fell into it. But if you're out there and you want to figure out what your personal brand is, I recommend just taking out a sheet of paper and writing down what you're good at, what people think you're good at, what you want to do, and so on and so forth. Get other people's input, and you'll start figuring out exactly what you're all about, because that is a big part of what your brand is going to be. And once you have that, basically do it, be consistent with it, stay focused, and it's going to go great for you.
And that's it. Again, last week we were focusing on find your why. Once you find your why, your brand becomes easy to determine because it should be an outgrowth of your why. And something that Chip just alluded to, he was on, he had successive careers. This was not his first career. you don't need to have your brand early in life. It's a great thing if you do, but you can always reinvent yourself. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of very famous entrepreneurs that didn't get where they were going until they were in their 60s and 70s. So it's never too late to find your why and create your own personal brand. All right, we are at the end of our time. So, Chip, what do you think is the big takeaway from this week?
Yeah, it's starting with why, getting that key message together, having a focus, being genuine, living it, and eventually other people are going to tell your story for you. And that's what's kind of happened with both of us, which is great. And once you get there, you got a brand.
Absolutely. I think for me, the big takeaway is that it starts with why. You find your why and be authentic to that, and that becomes your authentic brand. You communicate what your why is, you communicate how you're doing it and what you're all about, and you have built a successful brand, both for yourself and for your business. You've been listening to the Success Showcase. You can catch us every week at xvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts. Remember, make this your best week ever and make next week even better. We'll see you then.